Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And today's guest is Dr. Jill Leibowitz. She has been here before. She's our friend and fellow author. She's from New York City and she's a play therapist. And of course, in our world, our kids need play therapists. Whether they're young or old, play therapists are usually very, very helpful. So today we are going to be talking about how to prevent your child from being a victim too. You know, in our community, so many people are dealing with divorce and separation and custody, and kids who have to go back and forth from one parent to the other. And many of us have gotten out of toxic relationships, and so we're really scared of our own children becoming victims too. And so Dr. Jill, I'm just hoping she can get on here. We ran into each other at, there she is. Okay. All right, Jill, let me get you on here. She is one of our fellow authors at the Harlem Book Fair a few weeks ago, and decided to get together again. So, yeah, we were talking about how difficult it is for parents whose kids are going back and forth in these high conflict separations, divorces, co-parenting situations. And so Jill, before we even get into the topic, you want to introduce yourself again and welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Sure. I'm Jill Leibowitz. I'm a clinical psychologist and I have a private practice in New York City where I do play therapy with children and I do talk therapy with older children, adolescents, and adults. I also work with a lot of parents doing kind of parenting work, helping them to be the best parents they can be to their kids. And I do some what we call dyadic work, where I work with an individual parent and their baby to help in the early forming of their bonds. I also do some teaching and supervising of graduate students and postgraduates, and I wrote 2 children's books that use the familiar itsy bitsy spider to help get children and their grown-ups talking about big feelings together.
Yes, yes. And I've mentioned a minute ago how we are fellow authors. So that's how we met, because we have the same publisher and we're all like family.
Right.
Always get together. Yeah. So anyway, so Jill, I think one of the things for people in our community is, you know, we've been through so much and we get out of our abusive relationship and we are so worried about now our child or our children becoming victims like we were. We could get out, but they can't until they're a lot older. So can you first get a little bit into what is divorce like from a child's perspective? Because I think in our minds, we think it's the same as it is from our perspective.
Yeah, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind that, and maybe this is different for the people that are watching this and that are following you and your program. But when a divorce is fairly amicable and the parents are able to split apart in a friendly, kind way, kids have actually found it to be not that bad. And I've actually had kids say like, well, you know, now I have, 2 rooms and that's kind of cool. And they're able to talk about certain perks that they feel they get having like the 2 families, while they will also acknowledge the parts that are hard. But when there's a lot of conflict between the parents, I think it's really hard for the kids. They have like no control, right? Everything is being determined by the adults, by the courts, and often what they think and how they feel almost can feel to the children like that is not being taken into consideration at all. So I think kids can feel really helpless. They can feel unheard and unseen, and they can feel really torn to show each parent that they love them, and they can feel very caught in the middle and feel like sometimes kids won't want to let a parent know that they had fun while they were with the other parent because they're worried it will hurt this parent's feelings, or they will feel like they have to say negative things about a parent to another parent because they think that's what their parent wants to hear. So I think the big thing that kids have talked about when there's a lot of conflict between the parents during a divorce is that they just really feel very trapped in between their parents, and they feel helpless and like they have no control over really what goes on in their lives.
Yeah. So I imagine, again, like people in our community often feel like these are these high conflict cases where it's kind of a black and white situation where there's domestic violence involved. And so then a victim will say, I got away, and now my kid is being abused as well. So how does that affect a child who, there's a lot of debate about whether someone could be a poor partner but a good parent.
Mm.
Um, and that affects like our feelings with our kids too, of like, this person did this to me, so they're going to do it to my kid. And how do I deal with that? Or what mistakes do you see people making when they have that mindset? Because I think that's the mindset of a lot of people here is like, I got out of this terrible relationship and my kid is still stuck alone with that person.
Right. Right. No, and this has come up in cases, and I guess I want to be clear that I'm thinking of this as us talking about more like emotional and psychological abuse, which is horrible, and I think in many ways, equally horrible to physical abuse. But I'm not saying that if you think that there's physical abuse, you should do nothing.
No,
But
no, let's stick with psychological. Yeah, just we'll keep it at that.
um, so I think one, it is important to keep in mind that how somebody is in their romantic relationship or in the disintegration of a romantic relationship does not definitely mean that that's how they are behaving with their child as a parent. So that, that's important to keep in mind. Um, I've certainly had parents express concern that they are either observing or they're hearing things from their child that make them believe that their ex is in some way, they'll often say like, manipulating my child, or like, emotional manipulation, things like that. And I think it's so tricky because of the situation of the child being caught between the two parents. The truth is, the child has to have, if it's someone that they're having to spend time with and see, they're going to have a relationship with that parent, and they're going to have that be the relationship that they have with that parent, not the relationship that you, the ex spouse, has with that parent. And I, I often end up telling parents when they're worried about this, they worry like, well, this is then the model that they'll see for relationships, and they'll think that this is how they should be treated in all relationships. And I think sure, that's a concern, but there's more going on in your child's life. They have a relationship with you as well. And you can be different in how you interact with them. And so they can feel respected and not manipulated with you. And that gives them another model to also look at for how relationships go. And I think that ultimately, and let me add to that. They might also have other relationships with other loving adults. They might have a therapist where they can go and think these things through with and think about how they're feeling about interactions they have with that parent, but with someone who isn't emotionally invested in all of it. And so I think that you then have to kind of trust that over time, your child will develop their own perspective of who that parent is and what kind of relationship they can have with that parent. And they'll be able to own that. It won't be that, well, I don't know because, mom said this to me, and now I think maybe that's true about dad, but I sometimes feel differently about dad, right? Like then they get confused about what is their own perception and what has sort of been inserted into them. And I think if they can kind of have their own relationship, which they need to this is their parent, right? This is their other parent, and they, in many ways, will have ways that they identify with that parent, and they're, in theory, oftentimes genetically related to that parent. And so, um, they, if they only think bad things about that parent, then they only have that negative idea of that person to internalize back. So they have to be able to have their relationship, have their experiences, which will include some positive and some negative. And over time, through positive relationships with other adults and perhaps through therapy and through maturation, they will be able to kind of pull out the parts that were good in that relationship and the parts that don't fit all the other models of their relationships. And they'll come to their own impression of what they can expect from that parent and what that parent can offer them, and also what that parent can't offer them.
Mhm. As you're saying that, I think about one of my biggest fears at the time that I was separating, and one of our clients' biggest fears. And one of the things we talk about more than anything in our support group is like, how are my kids going to be okay? And are they going to be ruined because of the situation that we're in, or the type of person that my ex is, and how, if they're an abusive person, they're going to destroy the child. But listening to you, it sounds like they're not destined for doom, because you said there can be, it's not just like the divorce is the only thing in their lives. There's other people in their lives, not just adults who can help them, loving adults, but they're in school, they have friends, they have activities, right?
Right, right. And I think this is always hard, because I understand how difficult this is for the parents in this situation. But um, the I think what is most problematic for the kids is is being exposed to the toxicity between the parents. So in many ways, it can be more useful to just like sort of separate yourself out from what goes on when the child is there at that other home, and to know that you can give them a a safe place where they can come and they can share with you what they want from the time when they're with their other parent, and they won't feel guilty if it's something positive they want to share, or they won't feel like if they want to share with you a difficult feeling they're having, that is going to in some way like develop into some huge toxic fight between both
And
parents.
using court, perhaps.
Right, right. And so right, and sometimes they don't know like what the outcome of all that will be. And then the stress on both their parents increases, right? And so I think it's like, if you can hold an idea in your mind, like, I don't know, like sort of the mantra, it would be like keep the toxicity away from my child, keep the toxicity away from my child. And look, you can't control what the other person is doing, but you can work. And I know for in some cases it means working really hard, but you can work really hard to not express your rage towards your ex and your anger and hostility towards your ex, even when your child is saying things that make you feel rageful. It's really hard. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. So, Jill, can you give a couple of examples of, like, when you say the toxicity between you and your ex? I think people might just think of that as like screaming and yelling, but there's certainly more quiet ways to express toxicity. Can you get into maybe some of the subtle ways that people also might express toxicity to their children, or any ways where sometimes we don't realize it? Like, that's the part I think people need to learn about, because they think, oh, well, I don't say anything bad directly, or I'm not screaming,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not being toxic. Like, what are some ways you see that people might express it, which they themselves might not even understand what they're doing?
So it could be using like low level, benign word, negative words.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Um, you know, a parent, um, you know, well, I don't know, let's say the father says, like, you know, well, your mom was always a slob. It
Yeah.
could be something like that doesn't sound like the most horrible thing. And that father might be thinking, well, it's just the truth. It's just a true statement about my ex. But the child is hearing a negative judgment, and there's a hostility within it that children pick up on. So
Mm-hmm.
it could be um you know, not fighting with your ex in front of your child, but trash talking your ex to your friend when your child is right in the other room and maybe is hearing. You know, even when parents think their kids aren't listening, often kids are listening.
Let me ask you
Um,
something. Sorry to interrupt, but you just made me think of something that's happening with one of our clients, more than one, but where the ex is posting terrible things on social media about the other parent, like really bad things. And just from interviewing attorneys, they're like, you don't want to do that because not only, you know, in court can it be used against you, but part of the reason you don't want to do that is because even if you say my kid's not doesn't know that I'm on online, kids are always peeking into things, but your kids' friends' parents
right.
might be seeing that, and that influences what they, you know, what comes onto your kids' friends, which comes back to your kids, right?
Yeah. And actually, and I would add to that, the same goes for sending text messages, right? Kids are often seeing the text messages. I mean, I've had a lot of kids come in and admit to me the text messages that they saw that their parents sent, or even emails, because maybe the parents on their computer and this stuff is coming up and it's like just popping up, and the kid goes to do something on the parent's computer and then they see something, and then those kids get sucked in and they open it and they click and they scroll and they read entire conversations that they were never meant to witness. So yes, I think posting anything on social media or even sending messages that could possibly be seen, and don't assume that your kids are not ever looking at your phone or getting into your devices. And also some kids do it to snoop. Like some kids go in and sneak it, you know, mom's in the shower and they go in and they pull up her phone and they find all sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us assume that our kids don't know. Like if, you know, we're talking to our friends privately or we're having a conversation, but kids are so nosy.
They're so nosy.
They
And
are.
they're clever, right? They're clever. So they find ways of gathering information. So yeah. So it's, and look, and I know this is hard because you as a parent, you're going through this really difficult situation and you need your supports and you need your people that you can talk to. But it really means being aware of, you know, having those conversations with friends or family members when your kid is at school and they're not near you, or you know, going for a walk and having that call when you're out of the home or something.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I had a thought and I just lost it. but anyway, so what are some ways that what should people be doing instead? You know, I know all of our clients in this community are dealing with really difficult. Oh, I know what I was. Okay, came back to me. What do you think of the idea when someone in a situation like our community deals with a lot, where they say, "My kid needs therapy more than I do. Like, I just have to get my kid therapy. I'll deal with my own stuff, but they come first." How does that work?
um I think that if you're even thinking that maybe you have some stuff to deal with, finding some sort of therapeutic support can be really, really beneficial. Um, so again, I guess this is maybe like the main point of our conversation today. So much of how the children make their way through divorce is based on how the parents make their way through the divorce. And so, and if you're in a really high conflict, difficult divorce with someone who's been abusive to you, there is a lot to work through. And there are a lot of feelings and experiences, and little minor things can trigger really big responses from us when we've been traumatized. And so I think what happens a lot is some small thing that wouldn't make sense to the child why this is becoming a thing can be experienced by their parent as a really, really big upset. And I think that can be kind of crazy making for the kids. And so I think if the parents can have a place where they can go bring all, and I'm using this word, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but like, you can be made to feel crazy in these situations. And I think in a sense we need a place to bring the crazy where we can then look at it, process it, make sense of it, and then actually figure out how we want to respond versus being just completely reactive. And you can't do that with your child. And it's very hard unless you've had a lot of therapy already to do that on your own. And so I think finding the therapeutic support for yourself as the parent is incredibly helpful, and in some cases I would say maybe more important than the child being in therapy, because if the adults can kind of work their stuff out, again, it might not be a toxic situation for the child, and then they might be able to kind of like move with it and be supported enough by the grown-ups who can bring all of their resources to supporting their child.
Yeah. Or even one adult that brings all their resources to support the child, right? Because we can't control the other side.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So what you said just made me think of something very recent. I was with a friend of mine who had been separated from her older teenage children for a long time, but she got in an argument with one of her teenagers, and the teenager they were sort of avoiding each other for a while, and then she said the teenager like brought her a sandwich and left it there but didn't apologize. And she said, I felt myself getting so triggered because my ex used to do that. He used to give me flowers and he wouldn't apologize, he wouldn't take accountability, and I feel like my daughter was doing the same thing, and I got so angry. And so I thought that's like a perfect example, right, where her daughter was like, what did I do? Like, I thought I did something nice for you.
Right.
But my friend was going, this is the same behavior, and I'm worried I'm seeing my ex's behavior in my teenage daughter.
Right. And I think that's such a great example, because right, here's a teenage daughter actually really making an effort, right, to reconnect, it sounds like. And if you focus, if this parent were to focus with her child on the part about feeling like, you like couldn't make the apology, right? The child just feel attacked and like, what do you want from me?
He
I
did.
tried.
That's what happened.
Did it in the way that she could. And so I think that, in a moment like that, that's where you have to sort of remember that. And this is where it would help, right? If sort of therapeutically you understood this is what it's triggering for me, you could say, okay, right, but my daughter is not my ex, and she's a 17-year-old, and she's doing the best she can, and she's making a gesture to reconnect with me, and that's what I'm going to respond to. I'm going to respond to what her gesture was intending, which is the reconnection, right? And then that's how then you start to, like, it snowballs in a positive direction instead of the negative snowball, which would be if then the parent sort of accused the child of not giving a proper apology. And look, and who knows, I don't know what was going on with all of it, but maybe the child didn't feel like they owed a full apology because it's probably a complicated situation.
Yes, of course it is. Yeah, but that makes perfect sense. And I'm going to encourage my friend to watch this video just to get feedback from a professional about it, because I was like, well, this is what I think you should do. But yeah, makes a lot of sense. So what are some other ways, like I love that term, snowball in a positive direction. What are some tips that people can do that are right to help their child in terms of reducing the toxicity or anything else as they move through this, and to try to help them be as healthy and unscathed as possible, not just throughout the divorce or separation process, but through the rest of their childhood and then some.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of like you step back from it all and forget that we're even talking about the divorce being intruded in here, right? What do we want for our kids? We want them to be able to get their needs and wants met in their life through, in their larger world with us and also in the larger world. So from my perspective, it if a child can know what they're thinking and what they're feeling, right? They have their experience validated. That they know what they feel, that helps them know what they want, and it helps them know what they need. They feel you create an environment. You can't create an environment in your ex's home, but in your home, you create an environment where they know they can communicate to you what they're thinking and feeling and what they need, and they're respected, and you also demand respect from them. I'm not saying like they get everything they want, but you talk openly about the things that are going on and the feelings they're having, and you accept those, which might include when they're mad at you,
Right.
as they inevitably will be, even if and sometimes they're mad at you because you can't protect them from the situation. And then I think parents don't like that. Why would they like that? And so they do feel like they need to do what they can to protect their child, which in a funny way often makes everything get more and more toxic. And legally, often there's nothing much they can do. And so, in a way, then you almost have to just accept that, yes, there are some things I can't do. And I know you're mad at me about this. I don't blame you. I would be too. Um, and you'd be surprised at how that can actually help lessen the anger that the child feels, because now they know that you understand where they're coming from, and now they don't have to protect you from that anger that they feel, and often then they actually feel it less, so that helps it sort of snowball in a more positive direction. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm a note taker, and I've changed my camera so my paper isn't as handy. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to write down all of that, but I'll listen to the replay. But absolutely, I think that bigger question of what we want for our child. I mean, most of us in this day and age who care about our kids, who love our kids, want to have a good relationship with our kids. And you pointed out that that channel of communication is so important, but it's hard when our kids are angry at us, but that's just how life is. I mean, they're going to go through life, and they're going to meet people who make them angry. They're going to meet people who take advantage of them. You
Mm-hmm.
can't protect them from everything. So I think teaching them, like, there's things I can't do to protect you. I mean, clearly we want to do the basic stuff,
Right.
but there's things I can't do for you.
Right.
Like, there's limits, so we have to accept it now. What are we going to do? What can you do for yourself?
Yes.
And also, that's the way of the world.
Yes.
Nobody can completely protect their child from pain, even though we want to.
Right.
And that's what's
Right.
so heartbreaking, especially in cases like ours, where it's like you yourself are in so much pain, and your kids are in so much pain. You're thinking, I want to just do anything I can to take away the pain, without realizing, like, sometimes we just can't avoid it, right?
Right. And sometimes kids, I mean, I'm saying this because these are the kids then that I've worked with in therapy, so they've had the support of the therapist. But I'm thinking of a case where the child would be upset about when he was going to be with his father, and like sort of what those weekends kind of ended up looking like. And he would, you know, complain to his mom about it, and she would get upset and say to me, can't you say something to his father? And in the end, what I did is I just worked with the child on how he could communicate with his father, expressing what he wanted, what he didn't want. And he and his father ended up actually sort of compromising on what they would do on weekends, because it included the father needing to do some work on the weekends. And like a year later, the kid enjoyed his visits to his father. It wasn't terrible anymore. And I think it was really important for that child to learn, like to get his own sense of agency. And again, and that's where then he's working out his relationship with his father, which is completely separate from his mom's relationship to his father.
Yeah. I think it's also like I think about in general conflict, that when we're able to work through conflict, it is very empowering to be like, wow, I figured that out. I mean, you think about with a friend when you have an argument and you talk it through, it often makes the relationship even
Right.
stronger.
Right.
So I think
Right.
teaching our children skills on how to advocate for themselves, and we talk about that sometimes with our clients too, where they're like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, you can't control the other parent, but you can work with your child to learn to advocate for themselves and help develop those critical thinking skills or that emotional literacy.
Right. Exactly. And then, and look, and of course, there are going to be times when your child will do everything they can, and your ex will still do things the way they want and not take in the child, and the child will not be having a positive experience. But I think when you have kind of worked on this from this place of focusing on validating their experiences and helping the child know like what they feel is real, that they can then come away from those interactions with that other parent and not internalize what has happened in the interaction, so that they can walk away and maybe that other parent is angry at them, but they don't feel like they're a bad kid
Mm-hmm.
because dad's angry at me. They feel like, wow, he's impossible. Right. And that's really, and that's where I think, you know, when, especially when someone has been traumatized within their relationship with someone, right, that you can internalize the abuse and you feel shame and you feel inadequate and all this insecurity about yourself. And I think that's the fear that parents in this situation often have, is like that's what their child will then internalize. But we can help the children have those interactions, but not experience it with the shame and trauma like, you know, we, the other spouse, did, but more from a place of like, wow, I can look at that and say he was unreasonable and whatever. He always gets mad at me when I don't want to do what he wants me to do, but he'll get over it, and, you know, he'll still take me out to dinner next week when we're supposed to go out or whatever it is.
Yeah, like as you're saying that, I'm thinking about ourselves in these relationships, how we think, what should I have done better? What could I have done differently? How can I improve to make the relationship better? That's what we think will happen to our children. But you're saying we have this unique opportunity to work with them to say, like, it's not you. Even if they make you feel like it's you, it's not you.
Right.
It's whatever. Let's look at the situation. Let's look at how that other person responds when something happens. And the kids do start being able to maybe see things from a distance instead of feeling those same feelings that we ourselves felt in these abusive relationships of like, what did I do wrong? It must be me. It must be my fault.
Right. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, where you and other people that love this child and potentially therapists and friends and family um, can be helping the child have a different kind of experience, which then it kind of creates like a buffer, so that sure, they're having unpleasant visits perhaps with that parent, but they're not internalizing all of the like self-loathing and the shame that is what you fear that is going to happen to them.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, Jill, this is so helpful, as I knew it would be. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but if like yes or no, but either way, tell people how they can find you. But I don't know if you're taking new clients.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I will have to run in a minute because I have an appointment in a couple minutes. Um, but I am on, I don't even know what my Instagram is. I am on Instagram.
We have it. It's going to be in
Okay.
our
I,
description.
I haven't done
Your name.
a lot with it, but I guess I can be messaged through there. Um, and I really am not really able to just sort of put my name out there for taking new patients right now because I'm pretty full at the moment. But if someone wanted to reach me, I'd say they could message me through Instagram. And
Right. And your books? Tell us about your books too.
my books are they use the familiar itsy bitsy spider, and the first book, she goes through a long journey and a challenging emotional day. It's called The Untold Story of Itsy Bitsy's Long Emotional Day. And she ultimately has a meltdown, and the book is really meant to model for the grown-ups who read the books with kids how mama is able to help regulate itsy bitsy, but also stay calm herself, and how to think and to reflect, and what we call it in psychology world like mentalize about what's going on in itsy bitsy's mind, and then mama kind of articulates all of that, which helps organize it for itsy bitsy. So the story is meant to model the interaction for parents, and the back of the book also has some guidelines for parents or whatever grown-ups are reading the books with the kids, as well as some emotion communication starters to engage kids in conversation about big feelings, because the more they can talk about all of their feelings and understand them, the better they'll be able to know what they need and what they want and who they are. And the second book is called Mama Stressed, The Untold Story of Itsy Bitsy and Mama. And in that, it's a sequel, it's a continuation into later that day. And lo and behold, Mama has so much going on that stressful day that she has a meltdown. And so this one is to both show what it's like for our kids when we're stressed and how they can internalize that, and also what we can do, how to repair with our children after we've lost our cool. And it kind of carries the same ideas as the first story.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Jill, so much for that. And I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Yes, happy to. Thanks for having me.
Bye.